Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the GCNC Worldview. I am Chris Day, as always, your host on this journey around the cannabis universe. And this week, as we're sort of heading into conference season in Europe and starting to look at what's going on in the summer months across North America, there's a ton of activity for the GCNC. We'll be in Berlin at the end of April. We'll be in London in June. We also have the Cannabis Means Business Conference in New York City at the Javits Center the beginning of June. So if you have a chance to come visit with us, please do. We always love to see our member companies and those who listen to the podcast around the world. Today, I am excited to have some new friends. Frequently, I was telling them in the pre-show discussion that frequently I know a lot about our guests and their companies before coming on, but every now and then we get to do a journey of discovery together with new folks and new technology and things we haven't been exposed to. And today I'm really glad they reached out. We have Jane Sandelman, CEO and co-founder of Cannatrol, and Chris Mapson, who is the VP of marketing for the company as well. Here to talk to us about what they're up to with their technology, optimizing cultivations. And I think we're going to talk about artisanal cheese a little bit too, which is,
We are.
frankly, other than cannabis, one of my favorite things. So, Jane, why don't we start with you? Give us a little introduction of yourself and the company, and then we'll have Chris do the same thing.
Sure. Well, we are a company of about 20 people here in Springfield, Vermont, and we build and sell drying, curing, and storage equipment, primarily for the cannabis industry right now these days. But as you mentioned, we our technology was originally developed back about 15 years ago for the artisan cheese industry. So that's the sort of genesis of the technology. We went from artisan cheese to charcuterie, salami, ham, dry aged steaks, and then from there we landed in cannabis.
We're
So
going to
that's sort of the
circle
origin story.
Yeah, we're going to circle back and talk about what is the similarities between cannabis and salami, folks. But before we do that, Chris, how about yourself?
Well, thank you, Chris. Chris Mapson. I've been in the cannabis industry, started off in the flower touching in for the last 10 or 11 years, and then moved over to Cannatrol. It's an exciting time. It's the cure, dry, and storage method of cannabis was always something not really in the forefront of my mind back in the flower touching end of this industry. And I've grown into one of the, obviously in marketing, one of the biggest speakers about it because how important it is for this process. So it's just exciting to work with these people.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, one of my history, I spent a couple of decades working in quote unquote mainstream advertising agencies, PR firms, crisis communications, all that kind of fun stuff for a really long time. And then I flipped almost 10 years ago into the cannabis space and started really sort of going deep into all these different verticals. And a lot of my colleagues in the former industry said, "What the heck are you doing? Like, that doesn't make any sense. How are you? What's the transferable skill sets?" And I stopped answering because to me it was so obvious, and there's so many opportunities. But one of my favorite topics now is to really say, look, in cannabis, there's nothing new here. This is an industry that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. We have been overcoming stigma, but the transferable skill sets from all these different industries just make us that much stronger. So, Jane, I'd love to hear a little bit about the tech as it relates to charcuterie, as it relates to cheese. Like, what was the opportunity identified there? And then we can talk some about how was that transferred into cannabis? Because that origin story, I think, is particularly interesting to people who are trying to figure out, how do I get into cannabis? How do I diversify? All of those types of topics.
Sure. So it's kind of a little bit of a rambling story. I'll take you
That's
there.
all right. We're a
Um,
podcast. We're supposed to go down these alleyways.
Dave and I both come out of corporate. Dave's an engineer. Dave, my husband, who developed the technology. So he comes out of engineering and controls. My background is in marketing, sales, and management. So we're kind of, this business, or this little business couple. So about 20 some years ago, we left corporate and we moved to Vermont. And when we did that, we bought an inn. We did like this Total Bob Newhart thing. And,
Nice.
and we bought this inn. And we're running a restaurant in the inn. And it was a great restaurant. We had like Wine Spectator Award. We had a chef out of Napa Valley. It's fantastic. And we were really in the beginning of the local food movement. And as part of that, we had built great relationships with local cheesemakers. So we were buying, all this, we're in Vermont, so there's all this amazing local cheese. So we're buying all this local cheese and we become friends with the cheesemakers. And Dave's background being in controls and environmental systems, starts talking to them. And they're always complaining about how they can't control their aging rooms. So Dave is like, well, I'm going to tinker around and see if I can come up with a solution for them. And sure enough, he came up with this technology and we started playing with it, installed it in a couple of cheese rooms. And the next thing you know, the industry finds out about it. And we have installations in like hundreds of artisan cheese facilities all over the country. It's like this just crazy thing that happened. Um, then we sold the inn and we figured we were retired and Dave was going to just like build these controls and these systems for beer money. And then I don't know, one day we were like, because I grew cannabis, so it's like, we should try this and see if it works. And we threw some cannabis in there and it came out pretty good. And then we gave a unit. We sort of, no one would give us a room to test like $1 million worth of inventory to actually
Yeah.
no, and everyone was like, yeah, 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 sure. So Dave built this little prototype. Like he took a wine cooler and we got all these controls and sensors and he put it all in there and created like a little mini room. And we gave it to a grower that we knew. And we said, just play with it, see what you think. And we called him back like 6 weeks after his harvest, and he's like, "Oh my God, I don't know what this thing is, but it's amazing." So the next thing you know, we started playing with it and building these little boxes, and all of a sudden we had this product. And we took it to a couple of trade shows. People started buying them, and next thing you know, we've got this crazy cannabis business.
That's awesome. Every business is crazy in cannabis, but we're all happy that we're here and in it. So, when you talk about sort of the benefits of the system and what you're really the problem you're really solving, Chris, from a marketing perspective, like how are you positioning this? Because what is it that they're controlling and what makes it better? How does this actually help with crop optimization?
Well, you're actually able to dial in the settings that you need to control it and be consistent. One thing that we like to talk about is how the consistency of the product coming out of it is always going to be there, and the timing, labor saving. There's no more burping. There's no monitoring. You literally set it and can forget it. One of the challenges is communicating that over what we like to communicate as bro science. It's always been one certain way because someone taught me how to do that and they taught them how to do that. I know it doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. So it's education is what, I tend to try to focus on the most, obviously brand awareness, but education on there is a different way to do this. And it's been scientifically, backed with studies on how our process helps maintain a higher yield and product quality and higher terpenes. So it's again, it comes back to, yes, you've been in cannabis for 25, 30, 50 years. But there are other ways to do it that have been around, like Jane said, with cheese for the last 15, 20 years. But that process also works just as well, if not better, for cannabis. So it's getting that communication out there and sitting down and proving it. And
Yep.
it's very well documented and proven. It's a fantastic technology. I have our consumer unit at home, and I live in Colorado, and I tend to, run out of my personal product because my neighbors come over and go, well, this is better weed than I can buy at the store, and it's simply because it's not crunchy like everything else in Colorado. It's
Yeah.
actually sticky, smooth, pulling cannabis.
That's awesome. Yeah, I bless you for that. And I know not everybody likes to do the home grow thing. I'm a huge craft beer fan, and I've spent a lot of time in Colorado as well. And there's a plethora of breweries, so I always go to them. And people have said, "Why don't you brew your own beer?" And I said, "Why would I ever want to do that when I could just go down the street and hit at one of 15 breweries anytime I want?" And I personally feel that way a little bit about the variety of dispensaries in Colorado, but I appreciate the people who will take the time to do it themselves, because true craft cannabis, I think, is amazing. And it's wonderful when people can do that. And if you've got tech that helps that, I mean, that's a global phenomenon
Well,
that
the
can
amazing
go
thing was,
far.
yeah, the amazing thing was, Chris, sorry to cut you off, but I did brew my
Uh,
own beer about 20 years ago. And after I did that, I think we used it to clean the paint off the deck. It was cannabis was so much easier. The hardest part about for me, I'm literally growing my third plant right now. The hardest part for me was trying to figure out what to do once I grow this thing. What do I do? And with the Cannatrol system, I really don't have to learn anything. So it actually is an amazing little process. So it helps the layman as well.
So it's
yeah.
great for the home grow, but the same technology is being used at the commercial level as well.
Right. So this could elevate every commercial game just as easily as it did my personal thing.
So what we're
Yeah,
actually, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to ask you, Jane, and you're probably already there. When I look around the globe, I mean, all of these different markets are at different phases, right? And so early stage markets are still not to a point where they necessarily have large, well controlled commercial grows, but there's lots of smaller ones that eventually will expand. Like, where do you see for Cannatrol the largest commercial opportunity? And is it at home in the United States, or is it abroad in some of these other emerging markets?
Well, I think we have a big opportunity in the US. I think primarily, well, we have new markets still opening in the US, but there's also a big retrofit market that's happening. So we're seeing consolidations. We're seeing people buying up old facilities and retrofitting them, and they want to retrofit them to create really premier product. So they're going back into facilities that were built quite a while ago with old technology, and they're looking at ways to improve uh, quality of the flower, efficiency in production, labor reduction, uh, you know, profit margin optimization, all of those things. And that's really where we come in, kind of that retrofit market. Of course, in a new market, the best thing to do is install our system from the get-go, but obviously retrofit's significant for us. In Europe, we're seeing a lot of interest right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's new markets. We're also seeing a lot of activity in South America. So we just closed a job in Colombia. Um, there's just a lot happening all over the world. And what happens with our technology, and we can dive into it a little deeper if you want, but
Yeah.
we basically level out conditions year round, no matter what the geography or the conditions, the weather conditions. So you're
Yeah.
going to have the same, like for an MSO, for example. If you're selling flower in Colorado and Florida, you can actually have the same conditions in both places and have consistency of your brand. So the consumer, whether a consumer is buying your Blue Dream in Colorado or in Florida, they're getting the same product. I mean, that's how
Yeah,
much you can dial in the system.
it makes a ton of sense to me that you would have clients in Colombia. As you know, GCNC members we have all throughout South America, Europe, India, certainly North America. And I remember working on a project in Panama
Mhm.
um, about a year and a half ago, and really the single largest challenge was managing the environmental conditions inside the grow facility for folks who really thought they knew what they were doing, but they came from a different market and they were spectacularly good at what they did in that market, but they didn't quite realize the extreme swings in early stage markets, and the learning curve and the cost curve to that learning was huge. So
Yep.
being able to maintain those conditions is great. So yeah, let's dive a little bit deeper into what the system actually does to maintain sort of these conditions at a consistent level, regardless of where you're at.
Sure. So what we're doing is controlling vapor pressure in a sealed space. So if you think of your dry cure storage spaces as an envelope, so you have a controlled space that you're starting in, and we can either sell you that envelope or you can build it yourself with panels or however you want to create the environment. And then what we're doing is we're creating a vapor pressure equilibrium in the space. So not atmospheric pressure, but vapor pressure. So basically what we're doing is removing the water from the cannabis flower very gently and bringing it to equilibrium with the space. Then we hold it at that equilibrium. So you can never over dry your product. It's always at the perfect, the measurement we use is water activity level. So, I'm trying, so cheese, meat, cannabis, what do they all have in
Yep.
common? Water removal. They're all
Yep.
products that are sold by weight,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you don't want to ever over dry your product because when you over dry your product, not only do you lose saleable weight, but you lose quality.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do is bring the cannabis flower to the perfect level where it can't grow mold. It's got all the terpenes are retained, and we don't ever over dry it from there. So that's sort of in a nutshell what we're doing.
Yeah, and that gentle process Jane talked about does we have documentation that it doesn't damage the trichomes as much as a traditional method. So we're getting on average 16% higher terpene levels. And that's critical with that aroma and flavor.
Yep. That's
So
great.
in a traditional environment where you use like mini splits and dehues, which is pretty much what just about everybody defaults to, you have an environment that's constantly swinging up and down.
Mm-hmm.
So your vapor pressure is effectively always moving. What we do is we stabilize it. And if you
Yep.
think of the trichome head as like a balloon, and if the vapor pressure is constantly swinging, that trichome head never has time to properly cure. And it's
Yep.
weak and it's weakened and it cracks. But with our technology, it's stable. So it can solidify, that cuticle can solidify quickly and protect the terpenes.
Yep, I love that. One of our going to take this as an opportunity to thank some of our sponsors for the Worldview um, Emerald Lane recruitment with Stephanie Powell. Bovida has been one of our long-term sponsors as well. And the reason I took this moment to do that is because I always loved Bovida's line of "Save the Terps," because it is also what you're doing, and it highlights the need to protect the flower and all of its elements, because while people get obsessed with the cannabinoids, and we love our cannabinoids, we also have to have the terpenes in order to make it all work, and we've got to have the quality there so we don't end up with contamination, which lands all of these cultivators in these facilities around the world in trouble when they can't maintain it. So I love what you're doing. I think it's
Thanks.
great. And tell me what the vision is for like the next steps for the company. Um, what's the growth plan?
Well, we're looking at how to apply this technology in other areas of production. So potentially, how do we take this into the grow space? We're also looking at translating this technology to other industries that are non-cannabis, indoor food production, uh, drying things like seaweed, and there's just lots of opportunities to take this technology up and beyond the cannabis industry. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth, both in and outside cannabis.
Yeah, I like that. I think anybody that's really looking at cannabis over the long term needs to start looking at it as a contributor to multiple industries, not just an industry in and of itself. The plant's history, going way, way, way back, has always been as an integrated part of society, whether it's in textiles or medicines or recreational use, adult use, however you want to describe it. And yeah, most of the successful players that I've been talking to lately have started that mindset, which is we need to be both within the industry and industry adjacent. And that means all kinds of different horticulture. That means textiles. That means arts, culture, culinary. You may have benefited from hanging on to that restaurant because one of the big trends right now is, infused culinary. I just
Absolutely.
hosted a dinner on Friday night down here with a chef doing traditional Mexican cuisine and infused cannabinoids into it, and it was spectacular.
I'll
So
bet it was.
That sounds amazing.
I
How'd you get home?
oh well, you prearranged transportation. You're good. You're good.
And when's the next one? Just
We're working on that. I'll let you guys know for sure.
Yeah, sounds like fun.
Another, yeah, another one of our partners at the GCNC, Philip Wolf. He does paired dinners, and similar to wine pairings with
Hmm.
dinners, but he does strains. So slightly different take on the same theme, but um, through all of it, bringing back for those listeners, they're used to me going down rabbit holes and coming back. The quality of the flower and maintaining the terpenes and all that is actually what makes culinary work also, because
Absolutely.
Mhm.
if you lose the terpenes, you lose the flavors, you lose the aromas, and you're not, yeah, you'll end up with a high probably, but that's such a small part of what the actual experience of cannabis is supposed to be about. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. It's interesting. We were at the Indoor Ag Show last week in Las Vegas, and cannabis is now becoming a little bit more part of the indoor ag
mhm,
world. I think originally everyone in cannabis was like, "Oh, we're not indoor ag. We've got our own thing going on." And the indoor ag world was like, "Oh, we don't want to associate with the drug dealers." And
right.
now all of a sudden it's like, wow, we can learn from each other.
Mhm.
There's technology in cannabis that can apply to indoor, to other food production and things like that. And there's
Yeah.
existing technology that can apply to cannabis. So I think we're finally seeing that shift in attitude about
Yeah.
cannabis.
Yeah, we've been attending Green Tech in Amsterdam off and
Hmm.
on for the last 6, 7 years, and it's been interesting to watch in this discussion as well because huge horticulture show. I mean, one of the biggest in Europe. And originally there was like 4 or 5 cannabis companies in the back, and they couldn't advertise they were cannabis. You had to sort of just know the lingo. And then little by little, that kept expanding to the point where both Green Tech and local authorities got really worried that this was becoming, too much of a cannabis industry trade show, which I
Hmm.
found laughable considering, the size of the footprint. But I like the fact that we're making people nervous because that does show there's this mainstream integration that's taking place. And the cross-pollination of technologies is crucial to the long-term viability of the space and being able to deliver against the promise of the plant, right? And all of its different resources and uses. So
Absolutely.
love that. Before I wrap it up, I always like to ask sort of this crystal ball question of folks, where do we see the industry going? Where do we see the opportunities arising the most? And I'd love for both of you to answer that from your individual perspectives, whether it's specific to Cannatrol or in general. What do you see happening over the next couple of years that you're excited about in the industry and the opportunities there?
I guess for me, I'm really excited about the shift to quality, that we're going from a commodity industry who can produce the most cheapest to a quality industry where the flower is really being appreciated and handled properly, and consumers are getting the full benefit of the flower. So for me to see quality flower coming into the market and such an emphasis from the big players, that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree completely. When I first shifted into cannabis 10 years ago, every place I went, the question was, yeah, but how much THC is in it? That was the only question anybody asked. It's the only thing anybody cared about. And watching the evolution of the conversation is inevitable but healthy. Like we
Yeah.
need to speed that conversation up because it really gives a maturity to the conversation in the business that I think historically was lacking in most mainstream circles. There's always been experts, who have been really connoisseurs and been able to talk to that. But in terms of a broader discussion, it's been lacking. And so I agree with you. It's been nice to see that. How about you,
Yeah.
Chris?
Well, I'm trying to figure out the other answer I would say because you guys both kind of stole mine. But to emphasize that, it's nice to see. I started off, on that flower touching end, and it was, when Colorado was first legalized, we were the first state, and it was often running to the races. And how much can you produce? How quickly can you produce it? And like you both emphasized, now we're away from the Everclear audience. Now we're in that fine wine type of where people are now enjoying the taste and the effect. It's a lot more matured. And I wish I had a crystal ball to see where we'd be in 3 to 5 years with that maturity and taste. I mean, there's companies like who have brought the edibles to another level and to, drinks and everything else. And I see that all coming from quality and consumers wanting that quality. So I'm just ecstatic that I'm able to participate in a company that brings that quality to the consumer in the end.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I also like your comment on the diversification of the product lines. When I travel around the world, right, the thing that the US has done almost by accident, but it's a nature of sort of the way the country works, has created an enormous breadth of products and options for people. What we see internationally in a lot of those markets is going deep on process and quality optimization and like the EU GMP standards and all of those things. I think as we continue to merge those two ideas, which is how do you create a breadth of products that answer the wants and desires of the customers and patients, and how do you ensure the quality that a lot of these other markets are really staying dedicated to. The future for those companies who are pragmatic, plan their markets well, figure out what their niche is, and stay in your lane and manage cash flow and pay your bills and all that good stuff. Those companies that then can leap forward 5, 10 years from now, I think are going to have an amazing array of things that both serve customers and patients, but also allow us to be profitable, sustainable, and ethical in how we all work moving forward. So I love hearing about all of this. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on GCNC Worldview. And as I mentioned earlier, thanks to our sponsors. Really appreciate Stephanie Powell and Emerald Lane Recruitment. Love the folks at Bovida. Thank you. Whitney Economics has recently come on. We're doing a new mini series soon with Bo Whitney on cannabis by the numbers. So look for that to come out. Lots of things going on at the GCNC. Thanks, everybody. Until next time. And subscribe. If you haven't hit that button yet, do that. It's right down there. All right. Thanks, all. Talk soon. Thank you, guys.